Newsmax TV's continuing coverage of the New Hampshire primary continues right now as we look live at the Manchester Ballroom, the headquarters for Donald Trump, declared the winner of tonight's Republican primary. We thank you for joining us. There is a battle still in place for second place, and beyond that, in what is a rambunctious Republican primary tonight, we are so pleased to welcome into our conversation John Zogby of Zogby Analytics. He'll be Skyping in tonight from Utica, New York, and he will join our discussion right now. Also at Newsmax New York, Steve Malzberg and Rick Unger. So, John Zogby, you're the man who takes a look at the polling. You've heard the projections of Trump and Sanders as respective primary winners. Your reaction to what's going on tonight in New Hampshire, John?
The revolution is on. The outsider challengers were absolutely correct. Both parties' establishments are in trouble. For the second time in a row, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, this time in reverse order, have gotten over 50% of the GOP vote in a crowded field. For the second time in a row, Bernie Sanders has done exceedingly well. If he didn't win in Iowa, he almost did. And tonight it looks like he just shellacked Hillary. So now, I mean, the real question is, how do the establishments here regroup, and can they? I don't know that they can, to be honest with you.
Let me turn to Dick Morris, who joins me here on the anchor desk. Dick, it's interesting. The establishment candidate, especially on the Republican side, Kasich is running number 2, but in terms of money, manpower, and a history in South Carolina, Jeb Bush conceivably could be poised to go on.
I don't believe Kasich can possibly win this nomination. I think back in the days when independents could vote in either party, he could have, like John McCain did in 08. But I believe that at this point, Kasich is way to the left of everybody on Iran, on trade, on immigration, on amnesty, on deportation, on almost any issue, cap and trade, almost any issue you look at. And he's a one-state phenomenon. On the other hand, Bush had a convincing rebirth today. If indeed he gets 12% of the vote, if indeed he finishes slightly ahead of Cruz, or at least in that environment, and if indeed he finishes 2 points or more ahead of Rubio, he might be poised to be able to do that. Now, Bush has accumulated a lot of negatives in the period in which he was running badly, and those have reflected on people's judgments about him and his personality. He's reacquired some of the wimp factor that haunted his father's campaign. And I don't know if he'll be able to overcome that, but it looks like that may be a factor. Those who say this field will not narrow down are ignoring the election law, because the threshold requirements in those states require that it narrow down. Texas has 152 delegates at stake. You have to get more than 20% of the vote to get a share of those. So there's only room for Trump and a second place and a third place candidate at the most.
Speaking of Donald Trump, we are standing by awaiting the Donald's appearance behind that podium in Manchester, New Hampshire. We're also awaiting a speech by Bernie Sanders, the next door neighbor to New Hampshire, if you will, the Vermont senator, a Democratic socialist, winning tonight's Democratic primary in New Hampshire. As we have those speeches from the two victors, but also from some of these candidates who finished pretty well and are trying to manage expectations, we will bring them to you as quickly as we can. And obviously, there are live cameras there to record the situation, as you see, looking live at Trump headquarters in Manchester, New Hampshire. Let me turn to my colleague Steve Malzberg at Newsmax New York. Steve, you just talked to the Donald the other night, and the Donald remained a theme of your program earlier tonight. For lack of a better way to explain it, who will we see tonight in victory? The good Donald or the bad Donald?
No, I think you're going to see a very emboldened Donald. But let me, if we could, I don't know why that just went out of my sight, but according to Newsmax, I think this is very interesting, and maybe Dick could weigh in on this, everyone could weigh in on this. They did some work on the numbers, or we did some work on the numbers, and of course in New Hampshire, not only Republicans, but independents and Democrats could also vote in the Republican primary. And only 55% of Republican primary voters identified themselves as Republican. 42% said they were independent, and 3%, interestingly enough, said they were Democrats. So, I'd like to ask Dick and John and Rick, what does this mean as far as the numbers we're seeing for Donald Trump? He pulled apparently a disproportionate number of voters, including 45% who said their highest education was high school or less. He underperformed with those in a postgraduate degree. But what is this influx of independents, even a few Democrats, into the Republican primary mean when it comes to the numbers?
I think that for Trump's independents, they're likely to stay with him because they are downscale voters. The issue with them was would they show up or not? And almost nothing he says or does alienates them. On the other hand, with Kasich's independents, those are largely liberals who, while they won't abandon him, they won't be present in other primaries.
Certainly not in South Carolina. John Zogby, we made mention of the fact that the undeclared voters, the independents in the Granite State, would be a factor tonight. I don't know if you've had a chance to check exit numbers. Dick was saying earlier he thought that more of the undeclared voters would show up for the Democratic primary, but looks like they may have had a factor tonight in the success that John Kasich is enjoying on the Republican side so far.
It looks to me from the numbers that I saw for the exit polls, 42% of those who cast their votes in the Democratic primary were independents. 35% of those who cast in the GOP primary were independents. That's still a pretty high number, I think, among Republicans. They seem to have gone, they went for Donald Trump as well, but that's where John Kasich did particularly well. Donald Trump getting about 32% of those independents, John Kasich about 23% of those independents. Bottom line figure out of all this heading into South Carolina is that I heard Dick say, about Kasich, that may be true, and it may be true also about Jeb Bush, but both of them can't go into South Carolina. That's the bottom line here. If there's any chance that the establishment has of trying to stop Donald Trump, for that matter, even trying to stop Ted Cruz, there's got to be one, and one alone, among the establishment candidates. And the longer it takes for them to congeal around a single candidate, the more the official party is in real trouble here.
Rick Unger, your visage suggests a troubled reaction to what John Zogby is saying.
It can't happen. First of all, let's keep in mind that Jeb Bush's final stand has got to be South Carolina. Remember how popular the Bushes are there. Remember, there's a reason his brother cut his first ad for Jeb to be used in South Carolina. George W. Bush is still extremely popular in South Carolina. So Bush is going, especially if he ends up pulling a third place, which is how it looks right now. There's no way Marco Rubio's not going to go. Of course he's going. And Kasich now coming out with the second he's going to go. So that whole lane that we talk about of the establishment, it's not just going to be one person. They'll all be there, as will Ted Cruz, as will Donald Trump.
Dick, let me turn to the Democrat side as we see Bernie Sanders.
Comment?
Go ahead.
Because
go ahead, John.
Certainly.
Just like the debate, your name was mentioned, you can respond.
That's right. You get to respond.
I'm in total agreement with Rick on that. There only should be one candidate, but there definitely will not be one candidate.
Yeah, the dough that Bush has is just, he's going to play out this string, and maybe South Carolina will be his last stand. Although with the money, he could conceivably hang on to Florida.
The Democratic primary.
Throughout
the night, Bernie Sanders
has
been lengthening his lead.
It's going to be embarrassing.
It's now 58-40. It started at 55-44, I think. And it looks like he's going to be about a 60-40 victory, which is an unbelievable, incredible landslide. Now, the conventional wisdom among politicians has always been that Sanders might win Iowa, maybe. Will probably win New Hampshire because he's from next door. Can't win South Carolina because it's too black and blacks won't abandon Hillary. And then he'll sweep Super Tuesday because of the African American vote. Right, wrong. right, wrong. South Carolina will be a Hillary state. But after that, she has to run in a whole series of states which don't have black voters. Idaho, Wyoming, Texas is about 11% black. Tennessee is 8% black. Arkansas is 12% black. The only really black states you have are Alabama, Virginia, and Georgia. And 80% of the vote on March 1st is from other states. And if New Hampshire causes Bernie to develop a lead over Hillary in the national polling, which I think it might, you then have him with a very significant lead nationally among whites, which means that he's got a very good chance of carrying a lot of those Super Tuesday states. If that happens, it will take a supernatural event like Barack Obama's endorsement of Hillary Clinton to turn that around. Otherwise, they're going to go right down to nominate an unelectable candidate in Bernie Sanders.
Well, let's talk to our good Democratic friend, Rick Unger, about that. Do you expect Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren came out for Hillary the other day, but will someone emerge, most notably the vice president, to keep something like Dick's scenario from playing out for the Democrats?
Well, if it's going to happen, I think it has to happen before that March 1st number of states that Dick's talking about. I don't really agree with Dick. I think that Hillary's likely to do much better in those states than he might think. I just don't think states like Wyoming are going to vote for a Democratic socialist, but we'll see. I think Joe Biden's watching very, very carefully. There's also the added influence of whatever the FBI might be doing. So these are all factors. You know, Hillary is not in great shape right now. There's just no getting around it. But I think if you have to bet money sitting here today, it's still Hillary Clinton's nomination.
Well, we'll see what happens tomorrow. It could be a campaign shakeup because I guess the candidate's not going to take the blame. It'll be the staff.